It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Rodolfo Spielmann, CEO, President, and board member at NatureSweet. Rodolfo is a global consumer products expert with a consistent track record of improving operating performance for net sales, earnings, and cash across multiple categories in established and emerging markets and at a diverse set of companies and business scale. He has achieved above market revenue and profit by successfully integrating organizational, strategic, operational, and financial dimensions of complex businesses while mobilizing organizations to execute with excellence. Prior to joining NatureSweet in 2019, Rodolfo has had an outstanding career in the CPG sector, working for companies like Procter & Gamble, Del Monte, Mars Heinz, and most recently, Central Garden & Pet, where he was the president of their pet consumer products division. In fact, Rodolfo has spent most of his last 25 years in the pet food sector and has some amazing insights on just how different working in pet food is than the kind of food that you and I eat every day. Rodolfo Spielmann, welcome into the corner office.
Hey, Brent, great to be here. Really appreciate the invitation.
Great to have you here as well. And we've talked so much over the years. We've never actually met in person, but we've got that common background in Procter & Gamble. You started a little bit after I left, but great company to found beginnings, and you've just had such a stellar CPG career. I can't wait to learn more about it as we go through our podcast today. But we always like to start in the beginning, and that's kind of where you grew up and what your early family life was like. So tell us a little bit about that time of your life.
Perfect. So as you might guess by the accent, I didn't grow up in the U.S., so I'm from Chile in South America. I was born there, except for 1 year in Scotland, which I don't think counts. I was only 2 years old. Okay. I live all the time in Chile. I have an older brother, younger sister, but my older brother left the house when he was 14.
Okay.
Because he went to the Naval Academy, and in Chile, if you are going to go to the Navy, you needed to finish high school, between quotes, in the Navy. So I went from being the middle guy to being the old guy in the house very quickly.
Yeah.
But I always had that idea of, hey, the expectations were my brother. My dad was also a Navy officer, so he was a Navy guy with the brother Navy guy, and I had a younger sister, so I was the guy in the middle who I had a lot more freedom, I would say, to operate in the house.
Right.
So we moved when I was in high school to Santiago, which is the capital of the country, and it's a pretty big difference. So the one thing that it's very different than in the U.S., you go from the number 2 city in the country with, let's say, 300,000 people to the number 1 at 6 million. So it's a fairly sizable difference.
Big city.
when you move there. So I would say, honestly, had a really great time in high school, and the whole time, probably the biggest interesting piece on that one was that because of being a 6'6" Chilean guy, which is not that common, that they invited me to the national team in volleyball.
Great. Now, did you play volleyball through high school? Was that a sport that you enjoyed? Yeah,
absolutely. But it was interesting because I went from being in like the best player in the team on that small city to being absolutely a bench warmer in my high school for the first 2 years. And the team was fantastic. And honestly, I barely made it to the bench. So when we were probably 15, 16 at that point, and they called the first Chilean team, and clearly they didn't call me, so no debate on that one.
Great.
But they did call my friends. The coach asked my friends, "Do you have any tall guys that you know?" And they said, "Well, we have this guy, but man, it's really not good." And the coach said, "Hey, no problem. I know I can teach him how to play." So they called me. They called 120 kids, and I was clearly number 120. Up until today, by all my volleyball friends, I'm known as the cow for how my gracious movement in the court. But you know what? I trained every single day for well over a year,
Wow.
day in, day out, and I made it to the team and made it to the A team. I played the South American Championship. I played every game and got elected like one of the top 3 guys in the team, etc. So it was a really, really, really good experience.
Yeah, terrific. And this was high school years then, or college? This was high school.
High school, because then in Chile I went to study engineering, and it's also not the way it works here, where if you do sports, you're an asset for the school.
Right.
There, it made it very clear that, so you want to play volleyball or you want to be an engineer? I was like, okay, that's simple.
That's an easy question.
That's an easy question. So I ended up playing for college and a few other things, but after a couple of knee surgeries, I decided that was it. That was it for volleyball.
You had your time. Were you a good student in secondary school, high school?
Yes, I was. It's kind of funny because that actually probably dovetails a little bit with engineering. I was what I call really good on everything, not excellent on anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So if you would have done the ACT, probably in Chile, probably I would have not gotten any 36s, right, but it would have been in 34, 35 on everything, type of thing.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So when in Chile you do this ACT type test only once a year.
College entrance.
The college entrance, and everyone does it at the same time. And I got one of the top 20 scores in the country. So it was like pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then I entered engineering, and I did enter
bench, right?
Exactly. I did enter like I remember like I was 3 out of 400. So it's like, yeah, this is great. And first test, I got like a 20%. I was like, okay.
Oh my God.
That was it.
The challenge is set, right?
And I was surrounded by way smarter people than me. So like no debate on that one. And I always joke that you have to study 6 years to become an engineer. And I did the 6 years and then a couple of years for a master. But I always joke that if I learned anything, was humility there.
Yeah.
Because it was, again, clear that there was not a single class where I was even close to be the brightest guy in the class. Wow. But learn to surround yourself with smart people.
That's right.
And figure out how to get it done. So it was a great career.
And I'm sure that served you well through your business career as well, right?
Yeah.
Surrounding yourself with smart people.
Absolutely. And I think that there were 2 things, by the way. One is surround yourself with very smart people. But the other one is absolutely not being afraid to say, I don't know. Yeah. So it has been a bit shocking for me when in the business career, how many people believe that saying I don't know is a sign of weakness instead of a sign of, hey, curiosity, and let's figure it out together.
Let's figure it out. Yeah. No, that's smart. Very good lesson. Other than volleyball, were there other activities that you pursued in high school and things that you enjoyed? Any entrepreneurial things, for example?
To be honest, I worked since I was 9 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. So
family business, or did you find retail jobs?
No, not even close. And my first job was selling Christmas trees in a parking lot without a permit, and trying to escape the police when they were coming to figure out who was selling the trees.
Did you go and cut down the trees yourself? Where did the trees come from?
No. I was a middleman.
Okay. Right.
Someone else got the trees for me.
Yeah, there was a supply chain.
I had a supplier for me. I was a sales guy. But I kept working through all middle school and high school. It was mainly selling things.
Right.
all the time, and like selling things for Christmas or stuff like that. And then in college, I kept working, doing surveys, teaching, and anything I could find a job for.
Right.
I was there. If not,
I love it.
that was the money to have fun. So at the end of the day, for me, it was again volleyball for some time and have fun. And then in college, it was studying, not that much volleyball, but also have fun. So I needed money to fund that.
Now, you went to a Catholic university, Pontificia, is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, it's Pontificia Universidad Católica.
And you did both your bachelor's and a master's there. Did you do those back to back, or was there some time in between?
Yeah, no, I did them back to back because there was instead of doing a 6+2, I did a like 5+2 type of thing.
Right.
So I could really pressure the last couple of years and shaved 1 year for the master. So I just took it.
Cool. And was that your first choice for university? Was that where you wanted to go, or parents' expectations, or it was in Santiago, right?
It was in Santiago, and yes, that was my first choice. And it's a lot easier, or it was a lot easier in that time, because you would know your scores, and you would know what scores were needed in each college.
Right.
So at the end of the day, if you knew you were going to make it, you could pick a college very easily,
Sure.
which is a lot easier than here, where you're always uncertain who's going to say yes or no.
Yeah, of course. Cool. So you started your career, as I did, at P&G. I'd say about a dozen years after I did. So we do have a generation between us.
And a slightly smaller country, but yeah.
Slightly smaller country, but great company and a great start. Now, did P&G interview and recruit at your university? How did you get connected to them? Because guys of our generation, and I'll include you in it, we typically got our start at P&G. P&G really didn't recruit, for people in mid-management, right? It was always from a promote from within type of standpoint. At least it was back then. I'm not sure it is today.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it was that case also when I started.
Yeah.
And they recruited, but it was kind of funny because they had two companies recruiting in my school. One was P&G, and the other was a joint venture between P&G and a Chilean company.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Which the funny thing is, at that point, I didn't know that P&G was part of the joint venture. I only knew the Chilean company, which was one of the largest Chilean companies.
Right.
But my whole career, my whole life, I wanted to work for Unilever, which was the largest company and the largest CPG company in Chile.
That's right. Yeah.
But I was, at that point, I've been dating who's my wife now for around 5 years.
Right.
Yeah, and she applied to Procter & Gamble. I applied to Unilever and this Chilean company. And she got the job on a Tuesday for Procter & Gamble, and I got my Unilever offer on a Wednesday.
Wow.
And clearly that was not possible. So in fact, both companies had I wouldn't call it a regulation against being married with someone who worked in the main competitor.
Right.
So, and hey, my fiance got it first, so that was easy for me, even though I've been aiming for Unilever for probably 7 years.
Wow.
I knew that fiance was way more important, and nailed it. So we've been married for 25 plus years. Oh. So that was good.
I love it. And Procter welcomed you in, or did you have another offer from them as well?
Actually, like a week later, I got this Chilean company that offering me a job. So I took it.
Which was the joint venture.
The joint venture.
Yeah, right.
And 6 months after I started, the P&G guys said, "Hey, do you want to come to the main company, P&G?" Like, sure.
That's a good thing.
So it's like, absolutely. So I ended up working with my fiance at that point, or I think close to my wife, but that's how I ended up in P&G. So it was an internal move.
Well, Procter's a great company, and I know that you probably started managing people probably there for the first time, right? You became a brand manager there. Tell us about those early days. What were some of the challenges that you might have had when you first started, leading people in that organization?
So I think that there were a couple of pieces. So yes, that was the first place where I led people in the business environment. I've done that before when I ran a night school or an evening school, where I was running the evening school and had all the teachers. But this was a bit different. Yeah. And I think that the biggest challenges, the first one was let's hire the right people. remember P&G is all promoting from within.
That's right.
So most of the people who started to report to me, were very new to the company.
Of course. Yeah.
And at that point, the whole learning of having the patience of explaining and being clear on what you expect from every person, giving them the materials, the equipment, the direction, and then letting them work it through, versus trying you to get your hands dirty and micromanage everyone. So I think that was clearly my first big challenge. Yeah. And then honestly, it comes with a normal challenge of how do you manage performance? How do you really reward the people who are doing the extra effort? Yeah, and how do you have those tough conversations when the people are not making it?
Right. Tough. Remember the 6 factors of performance? I remember we had that as a Procter, brand manager, where you had certain things. Effective communication, I remember, was one of
yes, you're right.
Skills. Remember that?
Whoa! I didn't remember.
Back in the time capsule there.
And you went with effective communication. I was like, yep, I have that.
Yep. You check those boxes, and you'd interview against them. Oh gosh, yeah. I got to tell you, I still have some of those interviewing techniques, obviously, in my day job. But
and it was also one thing that was super interesting is that everything in P&G is done in English, and my English there was way worse than now, so you can imagine. But within Chile, I think I would have been average to average plus. So sometimes I had people reporting to me who I knew were terrific and they did a really, really, really good job. But every time they had to present to someone higher than me, who were all from US, they stumble around, etc. So I still remember having conversations with my boss at the time when he was like, "This guy's not good. You need to do something." And I'm like, "Guy, this is the best I have, and he's really, really good. You just cured the guy." So it was like going back and forth on those things.
They kept the bar high. They kept the bar very high, huh? Well, you left Procter, as most of us do, after a few years there, and you spent the better part of the next, 20 years in 4 great companies: Heinz, Del Monte, Mars, and then most recently, before your current assignment, which we'll talk about at the end, with Central Garden and Pet, in the pet food industry. And so that's been a major part of what you've done. Tell us what's kind of very unique about pet food, because, it's something that's absolutely exploded since the pandemic, right? And everybody's had home pets and so forth. And so there's this, huge, we've been doing a lot of search assignments actually in the pet food industry, interestingly enough, just because of, kind of that explosion. But what's your kind of takeaway from all those years working in that industry, particularly as it compares to perhaps some of the other things, like, now you're working with people food, right? Instead of obviously pet food. Give us a little bit compare and contrast.
Yeah, I would say that there are 3 big differences between pet food and what I would call more the human food. Yeah. So the first one is probably the most obvious one, is that your consumer is not your buyer.
Right.
So, and which means that whatever the buyer believes tends to be the truth.
Yeah, that's right.
Which again, in human food, as a mom or a dad, you can believe whatever you want, but if your kid doesn't eat the food,
it doesn't matter.
That's it. But mainly if you're talking about dogs, they will eat pretty much everything. So at the end of the day, the buyer is the one who has a lot of preconceptions, so who can believe what matters and what doesn't matter. Whether that really matters or doesn't matter is a whole different conversation, but that's one big
difference. Yeah.
The second one is the speed of change. It's just dramatic.
Wow.
So when I started this was 2000, there was no natural pet food, no anything like that. And then that came from nowhere, and it's more than half the business today.
Amazing.
And even when I was running a natural dog food business, a cat food business, I remember that we were moving a lot faster than what my company was moving at that time, Mars as a whole. And they were having a hard time figuring it out. What were we doing? And so we spent a lot of time explaining internally why the category was moving one way or another, which didn't happen in any of the other categories.
Right.
And probably the third one, which is very different, is when you think about human food or even detergents or diapers, so I work in tuna and a few others, if you can command a 15% premium, you're a rock star.
Yeah.
So like really, whoa, your brand can command a 15% premium. That's amazing. In dog food, you can command a 300 to 400% premium.
Wow.
Yeah. So the premiums are just amazing.
What do you think? What's the key reason for that? That's a really interesting fact.
So I honestly go for because you really don't know. Yeah. So
what people's price elasticity is,
or you don't. So if you believe, and this is the point, if you believe that one food is significantly better than the other,
yeah,
for your pet, and honestly, that's the one thing you give your pet, food,
right,
and the same food every single day.
That's right.
You will go the extra mile to pay for it.
Yeah.
If you're talking about human food, yeah, we all know that a Burger King or a Big Mac, everyone's you can live with that, and it's not a big deal. And you know what? If your food is not the only way we express love, so there's a lot of other pieces in your relationship with your family.
Right.
With your pet, the food is a fairly large piece of the equation. So that's why I believe that people have a lot less elasticity, if you're going to put it like that.
And people are fairly loyal, I think, with their pet food, right? I mean, a pet may not eat something, or maybe they have digestive problems. We had a German Shepherd for many years, and she, had such a intricate, digestive system. We tried 3 or 4 different foods, but boy, once we found one that worked, we just never changed. For the 12 years she was living, it was only the same food. Is that fairly common?
So let me separate the answer in two, because that's a super good question. If you have a dog or a cat like the one you had, it is common. So if you have a medical problem, absolutely yes. Now, in the industry, the theory is that people are very loyal and they stick to one food and move on, because if you switch between foods, the dog or the cat gets an upset stomach.
Right.
But when you do the data, that's absolutely not true. Uh-huh. I remember, and the last time I saw this data was probably 6 years ago, so bear with me, but I remember that if you are buying in a grocery store, you are rotating among 5 different brands in the year. Mm-hmm. And if you are buying in a pet store, you are rotating among 3 different brands in the year. So it was slightly less, but you're still rotating.
Gosh, that's something. That's something. So there are opportunities to change, and then you've grown up in marketing. That's kind of your base. Procter got your start, and everywhere else. Were you able to successfully change people's perceptions and their habits with pet food over those years? Is that something that's easily done?
Hopefully not easily, because that was my job. So let's say that, hey, no, that required a ton of effort.
A little bit of a challenge.
It's like, come on, that was a job. Yeah, but no, you could. So at the end of the day, you had a lot of ways of doing that. So you could play with the aesthetics or the visual of the food. Right. You could play with the aroma of the food. So at the end of the day, you had a lot of different levers to be able to change perceptions.
Yeah.
Now you could. Yeah. I manage brands from Kibbles and Bits, which is a burger. Again, fantastic taste, but let's be clear, not the healthiest thing on earth. To the Nutro or the Ultra brands, who were on the other side of the equation. So really, you need to know what your brand really stands for. You cannot make a burger, try to make that like the most nutritious thing on earth. You need to embrace the fact that it's a burger and move on.
Right.
But you could play, again, you could play with the visuals, you play with aroma, you could play with the actual performance of the food, packaging. So there were a lot of ways you could address the behavior of the consumer. Yeah.
Well, I have one more pet food question, then we'll get back to your career. But I'm just fascinated about the area. How do they do taste testing?
Oh, that's actually fantastic. It's a great question. So, and actually lots of different ways. So the first one that you need to know is that you actually need to be rotating the dogs you're doing tasting with every few years. And also you need to make sure that the dogs are not bored. Right. Because if they get bored, they're going to eat whatever you put in front of them.
Whatever you put in front of them.
Exactly. So net, the dogs that you're doing tasting with, they take them out, they're super well trained, they walk them around. So because if not, again, it doesn't work. So it's the right thing to do, let's be clear. But on top of that, if not, the tasting doesn't work. Yeah. So also, not every dog will be a good tester. Yeah. When you get a dog that you're gonna have in your testing facility for a couple of years, you do some, and you give them like really good food, and then you give them food that you know it's pretty bad, and you see if they eat it. Yeah.
Right,
If they eat
right.
both, you're like, okay, this guy doesn't work. But if they spit the bad food, you're like, okay, we have our winner. Yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
and then what you do is that there are two types of tests, one is which food they pick first, which you do mainly that for treats. That you put two treats and you see which one they pick first.
Right.
Yeah. And in the food per se, you check how much they eat of the food mainly. Yeah. Or, by the way, if they're not that good of a food, what percentage really eat the food? But when you get into a certain good quality foods, you should be around above 90%. So that should not be a big factor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Cool.
but it's actually, believe it or not, it's a lot of work and a lot of really smart people developing their thing.
And that whole system about having the right dogs and the right tasters. I'm sure it's the same with cats, although cats have to be so much more finicky. I can't even imagine how.
Absolutely. So with cats, you use a lot more which one do they eat? Start with that one. You're not gonna get to a 95% acceptance on a cat food.
Yeah.
But in dog food, it's easy.
Interesting. Fascinating. All right. Well, back to your career. We've all had mentors and a few tormentors, right, over the course of our career. We don't need to mention names, but particularly in the early years at Procter. I was there 8 years, a little longer than you, so obviously had my opportunities there. If you look back, though, at the lessons you've learned, either from those mentors or maybe some of the few tormentors on things not what to do, what are some of the takeaway lessons when you look at the corporate career? I mean, you work for great companies, Mars, Heinz, P&G, Del Monte. What would you say are some of the things that you kind of learned by observing, and or having folks mentor you along?
So I'll go back, and I remember I had by far my top mentor, and again, not naming names. That we were in a meeting. We were going to enter a meeting, and I was a brand manager, and that was a really big meeting. Yeah. Sure. And I told him, so are you presenting? And he was like, no, you're ready, and I know you can do this. I'm like, man, but this is a big deal for you. And he laughed and said, if you shine, I shine. So don't worry, I know you can do it. If you do it well, I'm shining. And that was for me a huge one, which I've seen during my career, that the best mentors and actually the best bosses are the ones who let their
push
team
out of the
shine.
nest.
And then when the team is not ready to shine, they take the bullets for the team. Yeah. So this is not a leave them alone in the open and see if it's not throw them to the pool and see if they float. That's not the idea. It's when you know they can shine, let them shine. If you know they're not ready, well, that's actually your problem as a boss, not their problem. And you need to take the bullets and take the responsibility for that. So that was for me one of the biggest ones. The other was the whole important on having the right team. So how important is to have the right team? And this is not only on selecting the right people and developing the right people, but also it's on making sure you don't have between quotes, a template for development. Everyone will need to be developed differently. Yeah, there are some people who can become high experts and they will not keep evolving that much in the organization, but they are fantastic in the job they do. And that's a lot of value. There's other people who will have higher potential to grow. And honestly, there will be other people who are probably not a match for the job. And I also had a job that a boss who said, hey, there are a lot of really good C companies for C players. Right. So don't keep them here. Let them shine somewhere else. Right. And I know it was pretty tough, but this whole idea of, hey, again, you need to invite everyone for the ride. You need to give everyone a shot. Yeah, but you cannot force everyone to be part of that ride.
That's right.
So,
yeah, good stuff. Yeah. What about negative lessons? Again, without mentioning names, any behavior you observed or things that you said, oh boy, I'm never going to be that way as a leader?
Micromanaging to death, which at the end of the day, that gets into, so what do you want me to do type of thing?
Right.
If you're doing my
just
job,
give up.
what is my job? I also saw, now I have the person in my brain, by the way, but someone who, the whole idea of shooting the messenger.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Which for me was crazy. I remember, and again, keeping names and companies.
And companies aside.
Yeah. So I'm gonna, because this is important. So I had a CEO who a couple of times I brought him tough news, but with clarity, this is what we're gonna do, etc.
Yeah.
And I still remember that the guy yelling and profanity and things like that. And I remember sitting there, and one of the meetings I told him like, "Hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
Are you gonna keep yelling, or can we talk about the business?"
Yeah, right.
And by the way, that
How'd
to
that
be clear,
work for
that
you?
didn't work too well. No, that didn't work too well. To be very clear.
Oh, goodness. Well, good examples as well. I love it. So, President CEO of NatureSweet. It's your first CEO assignment. You've been president of a couple of larger companies, but moving into that. And again, in the people business, right? Or people food business now. So tell us about that transition. You know, you'd spent so much of your career on the pet side, and I had to believe that was by choice. I'm sure you had other opportunities where you could have moved either within companies to other brands or maybe to other companies that didn't handle food, but pet food. But tell us about that latest transition, and you know, what was kind of the inspiration around it, and a little bit about your company, because not too many folks perhaps know NatureSweet as well.
Perfect. So you're right, by the way. I spent a lot of time in the pet industry, and I loved it because, as I mentioned before, so many things changing, so many different challenges, etc. So really a great industry.
Right.
And at the end of the day, the change for NatureSweet for me is I wanted to make a difference. So at the end of the day, hitting my quarterly targets is incredibly important, but honestly, it's not that meaningful. So there was a moment for me where, okay, great, we hit the targets again. Yay, the share price is up. And it's like, okay, and I'm sure someone made money for that. But then we have another quarter, and then we have another quarter, and then we have another quarter.
It was a rat race. Yeah.
It didn't mean that much to me.
Right.
So when I learned about NatureSweet, and NatureSweet, you would see that us in the supermarkets, we have it's a 29-year-old company.
Are they a co-op? How are they organized?
No, we're a private company.
Private company. Okay, probably.
Private company. Only one owner.
Right. Okay.
For the last 27 out of the 29 years.
And did you replace him or her as CEO, or has he been having other folks come in to run it from time to time?
No, the owner has never run it.
Really? Okay, interesting.
Yeah, but the guy I replaced as a CEO is now the chairman of the board.
Okay, got it.
And he's the one who really grow the company. So he did a fantastic job.
Right.
And the company for, I'm going to say 27 or 26 of the 29 years has been about snacking tomatoes. Those small tomatoes that you see in the supermarket, packed in a really nice plastic dome.
Right.
Yeah, cherubs, glories, constellation. Yeah, we're by far the number one player in tomatoes.
Yep. Oh, well.
Yeah. And in the last 3 years or so, we're expanding into a lot of other greenhouse grown vegetables.
Got it.
Yeah,
cool.
but that's actually the least important part of the company.
Yeah.
So the important part is the company is absolutely focused in transforming the lives of the agricultural workers in North America. So we are the only large produce company who is vertically integrated. We own the land, we own the greenhouses, we have our people working them, we have our supply chain, and we have the brand.
And that's both in the United States as well as in Latin America, or is that only in Latin America where it's grown?
At this point in time, we have most of our operations in Mexico. I had one operation in the US, which I shut down a year ago, but I want to convert that into an innovation center for the US. So really use the US for what I can get a lot of value from. But so going back to this, so we're vertically integrated, which you almost never see.
Right.
And the reason for that is because, okay, if you want to change lives, you actually need to have the workers. So, okay, that starts with let's have the workers. Then we go into, okay, if you want to transform their lives, you need to end up paying them much better salaries. And today we pay roughly 45% above the median of the industry.
Wow.
But the interesting thing is all of that, or like around 60% of the compensation is in bonus. and it's a bonus in productivity and quality.
Right.
So it's not that we're paying because we're nice people.
Yeah. You're paying
Our associates earn every penny.
Yeah.
So they are earning every penny they make.
Awesome.
And because of that, we have better quality. Because we have better quality, we can have a brand. And because of that, now we're the leaders in the US. So everything in the business model is done to see how we transform the lives of the agricultural workers. And we track actually what percentage of the workers own their own house. They can send the kids to school. So those are yes, we obviously track EBITDA, cash, and I have a lot of targets and a lot of conversations with my board. No debate on that.
Right.
Yeah, but it's all starting from, okay, how are your associates? We have our turnover in agriculture is around 0.7% per month, when normally you can get 15%.
Right.
So we're talking about orders of magnitude different.
Fabulous.
Because it is a different company.
Yeah. And how does that get communicated? Do you recruit against that? Is there a reputation? Do you bring a lot of your agricultural workers in based on, referrals from current employees? How does that message get out down there?
So it's a great question, and I would separate this in two. So for the roughly 5,000 associates that we have in the greenhouses, we operate in the communities. We do not use any seasonal labor. Yeah. And at the end of the day, because we're a very good employer, whenever a position opens, someone from the community comes in.
Yeah.
And it's either could be someone from the family, a friend, etc. We have had no issues recruiting within the community.
That's great.
Now, when you talk about manager levels, we haven't done a great job yet. It's coming. Great job yet, telling the story. But when we reach out to people, the first thing we do is to tell the story of the company and what we do as a company. Yeah. And we actually recruit for people who can live our purpose. Yes. We have passed on extremely qualified people who would be coming here to do a job, but who transforming the lives of the workers doesn't really make a big difference.
They don't fit the culture, right?
And if that's the case, it's like, hey, again, lots of great companies for you, not this one.
Not this one, yeah, cool. It sounds like you're working in a very different cultural environment than many of the larger employers you've had in the past. How has your leadership style evolved to account for that? Or hasn't it? Have you always kind of operated from that standpoint and maybe been, a little bit different than some of your colleagues at Mars and Central Garden and Pet and elsewhere?
So I think that I would say it has been a lot more freedom for me to operate because I've always believed that obviously you have to deliver the results. There's no debate on that. Right. It's the most basic thing to do. Yeah. And that there are bigger things in the world than just, as I said, hitting your quarterly targets. Right. So for me, the difference is where I have had to focus the organization. When I came to NatureSweet, the idea of, hey, in order to have our business to be sustainable, we do need to be highly profitable. If not, this is a charity and it doesn't really work.
No.
And really having this conversation with the organization saying that I remember using the analogy of a car. You buy a car to move from point A to point B, not to put gas in the car. But if you don't put gas in the car, you're not going anywhere. And I said, that's the profitability. Or it's like, hey, if you go to school, you don't go to school to get high grades. But if you're getting really low grades, something is off. Yeah. So those kind of questions, and so that was part of the conversation. While in other companies, I was more on the other way, saying, hey guys, this is not really about the numbers. We have to focus on something else. Right. Now, in terms of my style, I've been learning, and I still have a lot to learn. But I'm a big believer on, again, get the right people, get them the right tools. I have a leadership team who I met with in the first day and said, hey, so let's be very clear. I need you. I don't know anything about agriculture, and I need you to be the guys leading this organization. And I need you to be making decisions. Now, they were not used to that. They were used to each one in their own lanes.
Sure. Right.
So what I've been doing the most is working with them to make sure that they could operate as a team.
Cool.
So at the end of the day, I'm not the one making every single decision, which doesn't make any sense. But the right people are making the right decisions. It's a lot faster. There's much better ownership. And my point is, again, obviously to make sure that everyone knows what the direction of the company is, what matters, what doesn't matter, that the culture is the right culture,
Right.
and that we're really living that every day.
Awesome.
And also that I have the right people in the right place. So there have been a couple of changes since I joined the company in the leadership team, but only a couple.
Yep.
Yeah, and so far so good. Everyone else has been outstanding.
So,
in the last
so to that end, particularly on management and executive hires, what do you personally look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire?
So I'm a big believer that, yes, you have to be smart.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe more on the threshold smart. So you have to be smart enough. I don't need you to be Einstein to run a business. It's, by the way, what we do is not that complicated.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, I look for passion.
Yeah.
Do you really care about what we're doing?
Right.
Yeah. And I look for the ability to, now since we're talking about vice presidents, etc., the ability to develop talent.
Right.
And to stand up for yourself and your team.
Yeah.
So I need people who can stand up and push back and really, on a good way, fight it out if they believe in something.
Yeah.
And really getting the right people in the right place. So those are the main things I always look for.
Do you have a favorite interview question you ask?
Yes. So I normally I warm up with, hey, tell me about the success you're the most proud of. And everyone shines and tells the success, etc. I said, great. Now tell me about the failure that the most proud of.
And you get the deer eyes, right?
Absolutely. And the amount of people, here's the funny thing, the amount of people who said, oh, I cannot remember any, or well, and they give me a BS failure of, well, this product didn't work in the market, or I launched a new plant and I was slow to get the productivity. It's like, come on, that's not a failure. Yeah. And I always like, hey, I want a failure. I want something that you messed up. Right. Absolutely. And for me, what I'm looking for is, I'm not trying to judge the failure, but I'm trying to understand, can you learn and can you own up the things that are happening?
How would you answer that question?
Okay. I will start with like, from when do you need it? From today, from last week, from the last month, the biggest in my career. So
something from the pet food experience.
Yeah, I would offer many, but I would say that if you want to go from one of the largest and the one that taught me the most, I won't get into a lot of the details, but I was working to, Mars had acquired the Yucanuba brand.
Right.
Which was
the EAMS company. IAMS is
it was exactly IAMS and Yucanuba. Yeah, but IAMS was the big prize, and Yucanuba came with it and had a lot of potential. Yeah. So the idea was, okay, so who's in charge of Yucanuba now? And I was in charge of making that decision. My unit, which had been a separate company, was going to be absorbed within the Mars divisions globally. Yeah. So I needed to decide if the brand was going to stay with Mars as a total company, and that meant managed regionally, or it would be part of the Royal Canin company, which it's part of Mars, but it's a separate company and run completely separately in every country. Yeah. And making a long story short, I had a lot of ideas, a lot of preconceived notions, and I took a ton of feedback, but I never really embraced the point that I might not, and clearly I wasn't, I might not have been the guy with the right answers. So what I did was to ask questions to confirm my bias instead of really ask questions to open up and figure out what we needed to do.
Interesting.
And I made a recommendation, which the funny thing is they agreed on the recommendation, that they executed the recommendation. But right after we did it, I started to realize that, I messed up, and yes, a couple of years later they undid, and they went the other way around. So, and that was 100% on me, because honestly, I didn't ask the right questions and I didn't listen to the answers.
Yeah.
So I just went with a confirmation bias.
Great example. Well, Rodolfo, you've been very, very generous with your time, and I've had a lot of fun today. This has been great talking about pet food and learning about your career. But we always have one last question we ask all our CEO guests, and that's kind of what career and life advice would you give someone who maybe has their eyes on a CPG corner office someday themselves?
They pay me to do what I love. And for me, the first career advice is please make sure that you love what you're doing. Yeah, and that you have passion for it, because this is going to be a lot of your day, a lot of your life, and we have only one. So, make sure it really matters. And I think that attached to that is make sure that you're making every day matter. I went once, and sorry for going slightly longer, but I went once I was a director of marketing, and I went to a sales meeting, and a guy who had been with the company 40 years in sales was retiring. And he had a really good thing. He said, hey, just want to remind everyone that there's always another quarter, there's always another year, there's always another lunch, but there's only one time that your kid graduates from high school. There's only one recital. So make sure that you value what needs to be valued.
Yeah.
And then you work really hard on the rest so you can have because at the end of the day, you have to earn the right to value the other things. I mean, you really need to work hard to make that happen and have the flexibility. Yeah. But make sure that, again, you work really hard on something you love, so you can also make sure that you have some balance in your life, that every person will decide by herself or himself what balance looks like. Yeah, but balance is important. So.
Lovely. Sage wisdom. Rodolfo Spielmann, President, CEO, and board member at NatureSweet, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks, Brent. Really appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.